Hi and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. Today's tutorial is on stitching together a panoramic image using Photoshop. Now here I'm using Photoshop CS5 and this is Camera Raw that we're loading the initial images in. I know there's a lot of dedicated softwares that are just for stitching, but I find this works just as good and it's easy enough for me. So the first thing you want to make sure you do is select all the images here on the left. And you can do that by clicking on one of them and pressing Control A. And what that does is any changes that are made here on the right will affect all the images here on the left. Now, also be warned that if you press Auto, it's going to automatically adjust what works for the individual images. So therefore you're going to end up with 4 images with different settings. And that's going to mean your panorama is going to be different exposures and colors on each one. So you want to stay away from the auto mode. So now you can make your own adjustments globally. We'll come in here, recover some highlights, we'll drop back the blacks, maybe a little bit of exposure drop. And we'll go ahead and open the image. Now what this will do is it'll open each individual image into its own tab here in Photoshop. And that's what you want. So it'll load up each one, and once that happens we can go ahead and start stitching. Alright, now we have all the images loaded up. The first thing we want to do is go to File, Automate, and go down to Photo Merge. Now many people might use the automatic setting, but I find that cuts a lot of details around the edges, and what works best for me is reposition. So I'll click on that, make sure blend images together is checked, and click add open files. That means all the files you had in individual tabs are now going to be opened. You tell it basically what you want it to stitch together and click OK. It's going to go through the process of analyzing each image, and the images changing on the screen is being done automatically by Photoshop. It analyzes and figures out how to stitch it. It'll bring us a preview here in just a second. Now as you can see there's a little bit of change in exposure, and that little bit will be corrected by Photoshop. But if there's individual differences, it's not going to work out very well. And the reason in this photo why there's changes is because each of these photos was a 30-second exposure, and during that 30 seconds the lighting conditions for each photo changed slightly. But as you can see now, it's basically uniform. As I'm sure you can notice, on the bottom left and the top right, there is transparency, meaning parts of the image are missing. And what this means is when it was shot, every single image wasn't exactly level with the image before it. And the only way to do this on a tripod is you take a photo, and when you turn it, you have to readjust your tripod to be exactly level on every single frame. And even then, you'll probably end up with a little bit on the edges, which is no big deal. When you stitch together, you're working with a very big file size, and that means everything is going to be slower. Every brush stroke, every filter, anything you do when you begin editing is going to be slower working with a huge image. Now for me, I know I'm not trying to do prints or anything, so 1800 is a good size for me. So let's go ahead and resize this image to make it a little bit quicker to work with. The first thing we have to do is, right now we have 4 pieces of an image, and we have to make them one. So by selecting this top one here, press Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now it has merged all those into a single photo. Now we can go ahead and press Control, Alt, and I. That'll bring up our image size menu where we can resize. Usually on my biggest side for internet stuff, I like to do 1800, and as you can see, Photoshop will auto adjust the other number. I'll go ahead and click OK. It might take a second, and it'll resize the image. Now this will just kind of show you the difference in size. Now it's not going to be that small, but relative to where it was, that's how small it would be. So by pressing Control 0, we'll bring it back to full screen, maybe zoom out a little bit, and that's what we have now. Now to take care of these missing parts on the end, there's a couple different things you could do. The first thing is take your crop tool, go over the image, and simply crop them out. If you find that these details on either side really aren't that big of a deal, You can crop it out like that, and you have an image that's taking that out. Some people would stop there, and that would be good. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And another option is to take your magic wand and click on the transparent area. Now while holding shift, you can see a plus sign appears next to the magic wand. That means you want to add a selection. And while holding shift, I'll click the other area. That means I've added it. Now if you want to take something away, while holding the Alt key, you'll see a minus sign appears, and you just click on it and it'll subtract it. But we'll go ahead and make sure we have both of these here selected. A lot of times it's good to click on Refine Edge, and you can just kind of bring out the edge a little bit. It's not necessary, but a lot of times it will help. Maybe a little bit of feathering, but just for the sake of the video, we'll just refine the edge a little bit like that. While both of these are selected, we're going to come up here and we're going to go to Edit and Fill. And the default might be something different, but you want to make sure this use is on Content Aware. Mode Normal and Opacity 100, and click OK. Now basically Photoshop looks at the photo and guesses what should be there. So I clicked OK. Now there are going to be some problems every now and then. As you can see, there's a black bar here, and but for the most part it got decently. There's a little bit of transparency here, and most of this can be gone with the healing brush or however else you like to take out details. You might have to go over it a couple times to get it right, just real quick. Something like that. And same thing with the transparent areas. And just kind of work with it. You might get some weird things coming in your frame, but as you work with it, you'll get a feel what works best for you and be able to bring some of those details back. So however you choose to get your image into the panorama mode and take out those transparent areas, it's different for everybody. Now once you're at this stage, usually what I want to do is I want to keep this as the original, and while selected on our layer, press Ctrl J, and you're free to begin editing. And you can do whatever you want with it. It's now no different than any other image, and you can start bringing out details or whatever you like to do to your images. And at any time you can always go back and you can see how the image was made by unselecting all of the layers and one by one clicking on the layers and seeing how they were put together. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please comment them below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel for future Photoshop videos. Thank you for watching.